8, Etowah River Corridor, subsection G, conditional use to add new conditional use automotive paint and body shop, and amendment to Appendix A, zoning use chart to add automotive paint and body shop as a conditional use in ERC zoning district. We'll open this up at this time to any public comment relative to that, if there should be any. Is there anyone that has would like to make a comment regarding pro or con, I guess, about this zoning change? Okay, if not, we'll close the public comment period and we will open this up to the council for discussion. And I would like to ask Ken Patton to come up. This thing has been a little bit of a weird situation from the very beginning, and I think there's some items that need to be discussed relative to it. Ken, I understand that this property technically is in the ERC zoning district, as well as some CBD, and the CBD part was left out of the zoning advertisement or public hearing advertisement?
Yes, sir, that is correct. That was an error on our part, the staff level, to include both of those zoning districts with that legal ad.
So I would think it would be appropriate for us to, if time permitting, to re-advertise this if the council chooses to do so before we go any further with it. Because the public would not, I don't know, you can ask the city attorney, but the public would not have been aware, based on that advertisement, that some of it was in CBD.
The thing you're dealing with here is not specific to that property. This is just changing the ordinance to add conditional use.
I know, but you still would have to add what the ordinance said, wouldn't you, CBD, because that's not in there.
Because we're only adding it to the ERC as a conditional use in the ERC, right?
Okay.
We're not dealing with CBD at all.
This proposal is the applicant with the original application, which was denied by city council, part of his property is currently zoned DRC. Part of his property is on central business district.
Would we have to take some action to allow it in CBD?
Yes.
Then we would have to start over. I mean, we wouldn't be solving the problem with this.
Right, yeah.
My understanding that that particular business was on the CBD portion of his property and not the Etowah River Corridor portion.
Okay. Anyone have a question about this? Does anyone understand it? Straighten it up, okay. Is it then your choice to go ahead and re-advertise this? Is changing the...
Well, what action in CBD would we have to do?
Same as with Etowah River Corridor, proposed a conditional use.
Added as a conditional use to CBD as well?
Yes,
so
sir, for that subcategory.
Okay. I'll entertain a motion that we do that. You did say we had time, we didn't have to act on this tonight.
That is correct. This would have been the first reading of
Anyway,
the ordinance to
okay.
amend, and action would have taken place in 2 weeks. We'll have to bring this back in April in regards to first reading for the amendment to advertise for CBD as well as ERC. And actually, we could probably do it just the CBD instead of the ERC, because that's a particular piece of property that's zoning that's involved with that business.
Ms. McGregor?
Are we holding up this person's business with this delay? Are they able to continue with business?
They have,
City
yes.
council directed last month to allow the business to continue until this is resolved in finality by city council.
I'll entertain a motion that we re-advertise this properly and for another public hearing. Have a second?
Second.
Motion said, those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. All members voted for the motion. Thank you, Ken.
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, council members.
We will close the public hearing. All right, I'd like to call our regular council meeting work session to order. This is March 6, 2014. And if you you would please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance and remain standing for the invocation. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Would you give the invocation, Mr. Rust?
Dear Lord, please give us the foresight to make very good decisions here tonight, and at the end of this meeting, to still like each other. Thank you.
I should have given you more warning, and I apologize for that, but it was John, I should have given you more warning, but it was either you or me.
I talked to the right guy there.
We really do miss Jack tonight, don't we? Okay. Certainly like to welcome all of our guests and visitors here tonight. We have some special guests that, especially so that we have that have volunteered to serve on our Canton's Future Commission, which began, I guess, close to a year ago, didn't it? Pretty
I think it was
close.
April.
It was in April of 2013, and did an awful lot of work. Mr. Rust directed that committee as the chair before he got elected to the council, and so he had to come off at that point. So there are several vacancies that needed to be filled. So what I'd like to do, if we could, is just ask each of the future commission members to stand as their particular appointing council member calls their name. I have the list here if anybody has forgotten anything, but because it has been a little while. But I'd like to begin actually myself. John Fodor, I don't know if he's able to be here or not, but he is a resident out of Soleil, and hopefully he has expressed a strong interest in our city and how it operates and what the future might be like for the city. John Fincher, I don't believe he's here, but he too is very similar. He lives in the downtown Golf Course Road area. And of course, Ferris Young, is Ferris here? Okay, Ferris, of course, has Young's books here in downtown and lives down in River Green. And he's been very active in a number of our organizations and committees already. So I would ask Ms. McGrew if she would introduce her three.
Sure. First of all, I would introduce Ms. Pat Tanner. She's one of the hardest working citizens Canton has. She's been on council, and she is on another committee, and one of the most dedicated, active, Canton-loving people that I've ever met. Pat, thank you so much. I appreciate your willingness to help on this committee. And I met two very strong women. Well, I met lots of strong women, strong men on my campaign, but I'd like to introduce Ms. Irene Stout, who wants to get involved in the city, has lots of ideas, loves living in Canton, and offered to help, and she's going to be a perfect match for this committee. Thanks, Irene. Linda Panzica lives in Great Sky, as does Irene. Linda is a very strong woman. She's a court reporter, and she has shown a lot of interest in Canton since she's moved here, wants to get involved. Her husband, Carmen, also wants to get involved. They both couldn't be on the committee, so I chose Linda. Linda, thank you so much for being willing to help Canton.
Okay. Mr. Rust.
Ben Key. I think most of us know Ben. And in fact, because it's raining outside, Ben is really out there measuring the rainfall and making sure it's going in the right places. But Ben was my co-chairman on this committee, and I was really, really pleased to have him help me. The 21 members of this commission actually take a vote, and that's how I got voted in. And Ben got voted in as co-chairman, and we made a great team. We made progress. For 2050, we started really looking at 2014, and that was a one-year progress that we made. But no, when you're looking out that many years, it's hard, and we did have a core group that came a lot, and Ben was one of those, so thank you very much. I'm looking forward to Ben carrying on the work of the commission. The second person is Tim McCraddock, and Tim is here. And he was one of the people that came very regularly, and tonight we can commiserate about how cold it is, because we both lived very close to one another in Illinois, and it's cold. But thank you. Tim was a big participant. He was there a lot. He had things to say. He contributed, and I appreciate that. And he was going to be off the commission unless I reappointed him myself. So that was great. Roy Taylor came and had a lot to say, a lot to contribute. He's got very visionary ideas about the future of Canton. He lets us all know that, and we appreciate that. And when he came, I knew he had to be on there some way, so I was very happy that I could appoint Roy to that commission. And Roy has to leave early tonight, so we got you done early.
Okay. We do not have everybody's email addresses, so I'm going to leave a couple of forms on the back here that people that have been asked could check and see if we have your email. Like Pat, we don't have your current email here. So I'm going to just leave it on the back table. People could fill those out, and somebody, Ben, maybe you could grab whatever.
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things is you got to be able to communicate and let people know when the meetings are, and keep people coming to those meetings. But thank you, all three of you, for participating again in this new Vision for Canton. I know this is going to be even greater this year. Thank you.
Bill Grant?
I'd like to introduce my three appointees. Begin with a young man who's been checking in with me for quite some time, even before I was elected, asking how he could get involved in the city. He lives in the downtown area. He's so young that that's his last name, Brandon Young. Glad to have you here. And then someone I've met over the past few years. I've been impressed with her energy and her passion for Canton, and has very creative ideas. And she and her husband Frank are always seen downtown our first Fridays and doing things in the city. But Mickey Farley from Soleil. And then another young man that I've met over the course, actually met he and his wife when they first came through my house in the Canton holiday tour of homes last year, and had some very great conversations with them, and got to know them better since though. But Larry Pujol from Great Sky. Thank you all for your willingness to serve on this committee.
Mr. Cummings?
Two of mine are returnees, Jennifer Dunn, I don't think she's out of town, and Corey Wilson, who were already on it, and replacing Mr. Russ is Bob Riley from Great Skies. Some of you know he ran for city council. I don't know if he's here tonight, but he ran for city council and showed an interest in the city, so I appointed him to this commission.
Mr. Huff?
Mine returning.
Any of those here?
No.
Okay. And those would be Candace Walker Bunda, Bill Henry, and Ned Castleberry.
Correct.
Okay.
Excuse me, one thing. I think Bill resigned.
I'm sure he's talked about it, yeah.
Oh, he actually sent me a letter that he resigned. We came back. Okay.
No, I'll
I hope he's
Yeah, I know that.
That's a good idea, I know. And Mr. Goodwin's three, if any of those are here, Andy Alexander, Ken Roberts, and Clinton Weatherby. Okay. Well, I'd like to say, those of you who are not on that committee, if you have any thoughts, ideas, you know now who is on it, and you can convey that as relative to what you would like to see your city become. I mean, it's, you know, we have to have a vision of some sort. Everybody's got their own ideas about what the future of Canton should be. And I think that, you know, we're going to try to funnel this vision into some document ultimately that will give us sort of a framework from which to our decisions the decisions of the council would stay within and on target toward that vision. A vision is certainly going to be ever-changing and moving target, and you know, it'll change as the years go along, but you got to have something. You got to be visualizing some future goal out there in order to achieve it. So I'd like to thank all those who have volunteered to serve on that committee. It is a very important committee. It makes us all think. It makes us all brainstorm, really. Think of some ideas that might seem crazy today, but will not be crazy in the next 25 or 30 years. And so, once again, thank you for serving, and we appreciate it. You will be notified I'm hopeful the first meeting to kind of organize will be probably in the next 2 to 3 weeks, but you'll be notified of that particular date and time, and hopefully it won't conflict with too many of you. Thanks again. All right, moving along. I will entertain a motion to consider approval of our agenda.
I move to approve the agenda with 2 amendments, please.
Okay?
From new business, I would like to move item A and H into old business as they've been discussed before. I'd like to move item H to be the first thing discussed in old business.
So you want the growlers discussion, essentially will be item A again under old business.
Correct.
And you want to, and we would move,
Item A and new business into wherever in old business.
okay, we'll make that item C in old business. Okay? That make sense?
Yes, it does.
Okay. Anyone else have any changes you'd like to request? Okay, with those, do we have a motion that we approve the agenda with those changes?
Second. Motion, right, correct?
Yeah.
Oh.
So she proposed that.
Corrections.
Okay,
amendments.
your motion is with the correction, so we have a second? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, no. All members voting for the motion. I hope I've got that down right, I think I do. Okay. All right, you have in your agenda package the minutes from February the 20th, council meeting. Are there any changes, corrections, just comments?
Mr. Mayor, get to the item G under old business. I know I made the motion, but then I corrected the motion. It's actually a motion to approve the employee health insurance and benefits plan, not just Blue Cross Blue Shield.
That is correct, I remember that, yes.
And I did correct it, and so we should strike out Blue Cross and Blue Shield and change it to employee health insurance and benefits plans.
Right. Any other changes, corrections? Okay, if not, entertain a motion to approve the minutes with that change.
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. All members voted for the motion. You also have in your agenda package the January financials. Are there any questions or comments regarding those? We have our CFO here if we need to ask any specific questions. Okay. We're now in our 10-minute public input period, and we have a couple of people signed up. Mr. Alan Davenport, if you would come up to the front, and Alan is someone who has a growler store. I don't mean to interrupt or anything, but has a growler store in Flowery Branch, I believe it is.
Flowery Branch at Susan Gainesville on the square.
And he's here to kind of make some comments about growler stores, and we're hoping you'll have an interest in doing something here in our city. Okay. Thanks to you.
Yes, sir. I saw this on the agenda, Mayor, Mr. Grant brought it to my attention, and with my involvement in Flowery Branch and getting growlers on Main started there, I realized in a hurry that the growler concept, whether it may be a normal thing that has been happening in Atlanta or inside the perimeter for the last 4 years, outside the perimeter, the terms, the conditions, business plan, but I know that there can be a lot of questions. So just with my experience, I just wanted to offer my expertise and a shoulder to lean on, or any questions that you have in regards to the concept of growlers, I would be happy to answer. I can tell you that in the time that we've opened growlers on Main and Flowery Branch, last month we filled over 2,000 growlers. That has brought countless number of people, an influx of people into Old Town Flowery Branch, which is kind of all the beat path. So it is a destination spot. Craft beer drinkers like to come and experience and expand their palates. Non-craft beer drinkers like to come and talk with people and make it a new hobby. So getting very involved in the community. Our company, Growlers on Main, is planning on expansion to Gainesville, as I said, and also franchising across the U.S. because of our success. And the model being, get involved in the community and be a part of the community is very important. All of our festivals that we put on ourselves, we give back to the community a percentage. For example, the Irish Band Jam that we have going on March 15th, we have decided with the council to let those proceeds go to Shop with a Cop in the community. We always try and pick a different charity that is important. So if you have any questions, I am here to help and here to answer.
Okay, I think if anyone has any questions, we deviate from our normal, speaking monologue there, but does anybody have any questions since Mr. Russ?
I actually went to a growler store in Swanee, and I thought it was called the Growler, and yours is called the Growler on Main?
The one in Swanee, there are two. One's the Beer Growler, which is behind Chick-fil-A there.
Yeah, that's the one.
And then there's Catch a Draft there. The Growler, the Beer Growler is a franchise. They kind of started the whole movement in Atlanta.
Okay. You operate under an agricultural license. Can you explain what that does, how that's different from a tavern?
But because all we're doing is sampling, all we're doing is repackaging beer out of a keg and putting it into a growler, sealing it, and passing it on. So there's no health department rules. We have our own standards. We have a 3-well sink, so when people bring back the growlers, they go through a detergent wash, a rinse, and a sanitizer before we refill the growlers and give them back to that same person. Other than that, that's I assume the reason why it's under agriculture.
When I went in, I know that you can take a very small amount of samples each one, or how many you want, up to a limit of what you can serve. I think is 8 ounces is what we're proposing. Does 8 ounces work for you? Is that what your ordinance
It
is?
seems sufficient. In Flowery Branch, it is only 3 1-ounce pours.
Oh, okay.
As the business owner and the one looking at the books every day, to limit it is actually a good thing. You don't want people hanging out in the store. You want them to come, get their taste, experience, the feeling of the growler store, and then leave.
Well, you could
make sure people get out.
You could go and take your growler in the car and then come back and try it again to get another one.
No,
You can't do that.
The regulation is actually within a 24-hour period.
Ah, okay. Well, one other thing, that we're trying to change our ordinance allowing a refill. If you didn't have an ordinance that will allow refills, you're pretty much out of business, I would think, right? You can't, because you can't make money, or the customer, the cost of the beer gets too high if he has to buy a bottle every time he comes in.
Right,
That's correct?
If you consider it a green business model, basically, they're making a deposit on the bottle. It's a glass vessel.
Or if they bring in one from another growler store.
You can use that one. The only stipulation is any vessel that comes in cannot be any greater than 64 ounces, and it has to have the Surgeon General warning on it.
It has to have the appropriate sealable cap.
Correct, a cap and a seal.
Well, you put the seal on though, after you fill it, yeah.
It's a shrink wrap.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what you walk out the store with a
Yeah.
shrink wrap cap.
Correct.
Can't be broken. Okay, thank you.
Okay, anyone else? Okay.
Mayor Hopkins and Bill Grant have my contact. Feel free to call me with any questions.
Thank you so much for coming, appreciate it. Very good. Linda Panzica,
Yes, sir.
did you sign up, you want to speak?
No, I did not. I'm sorry. I just thought it was signing in just to sign
Okay.
in. I didn't realize it was
That
to
happens a lot, actually. That happens a lot. Okay. All right, let me bring us up to date on some things here. Ladies and gentlemen, members of the council, staff, guests and visitors, I can report to you tonight that the state of the city is good. I'm sure you didn't expect me to say anything else, but it is good. Revenues are increasing, debt is decreasing, taxes are still low, morale of our city staff is high, our council is beginning to work together, and optimism about our city's future has never been higher. It's clear that our local economy is improving. If you look at our 2013 economic indicators, they show a very strong improvement over 2012. Our single-family building permits are up 61% over 2012, which is from 104 up to 170. Our general fund revenues are up 4% over 2012 and 7.5% up over 2011, yet we still have the same millage rate. Our sales tax, or special purpose local option sales tax collections, are up 14% over 2012. Our hotel motel tax is up 11% over 2012. And our impact fees are up 94% over 2012 and 103% over 2011. We have issued last year 147 new business licenses. 103 were issued in 2012. So we're up 43% on the issuance of business licenses. All these are indications that our city's financial and overall economic climate is improving. These positive factors will certainly help our city continue to meet its mission in the future. And our mission is to provide the quality of life by actually providing what our citizens demand, the services that they demand, while keeping the quality of life in mind all the time as we go through. But we don't just provide those services, we have to provide them at the most cost-efficient way. And some of the accomplishments that we have made in meeting this mission this past year, in part, would be in the following. We have begun to pay more attention to the maintenance of our water and sewer system, which had been sorely lacking for a long time. This year, we rehabilitated the Harmon Field Sewer Lift Station. We also rehabbed the Amos Road and the Ridge Pine water tanks. Been needing it for a long time. We have others as well. We resolved a water pressure problem and fire protection issue in the State Route 140 area near Mountain View. Additionally, as a part of our overall water system, we completed our reservoir office building at a cost of around $400,000. And we have taken bids recently for the upgrades to our wastewater treatment plant, a project that's going to end up costing around $7 to $8 million. We completed 2 streetscape projects which were inherited commitments, the Wallaska Street, where the new entrance is, and the sculpture, and the Hickory Flat Road from Marietta to I-575 project. And we have begun the Marietta Road project from John Pettit all the way up to Marietta Highway. Northside Cherokee Boulevard was opened last year, of course, with the help of the state and the county. And for that, we are grateful to them. Our police department initiated a bike patrol to create a presence and to build community relations, especially in the downtown area and especially at special event activities. Every sergeant and manager of the police department had training in what's called CompStat, which is computerized statistics. And as I understand it, it allows our law enforcement to focus our resources and personnel in areas where of the highest need, whether it may be crime areas or traffic areas or whatever. But it allows us to make better use of our resources and personnel. Our fire department underwent an ISO evaluation last year, and we retained our ISO of 4, came close to a 3. We are one of 126 fire departments in this state out of 1,100 that have a rating of 4. There are others that have slightly less than that. We're still working now to meet our fire service needs, and hopefully we will seek and accomplish a long-term solution. We're in the top 200 in the state with a class 4 or better. The Etowah River Park construction continued on it, and this, of course, is almost complete. Hopefully by June, we're told by June, we'll be able to utilize at least a portion of that park, maybe all of it. Last year, we purchased 20 acres on the reservoir of Bluffs Parkway for a park area and possibly a new fire station. We constructed a boat ramp at the reservoir and a launch site, and also a parking area there on Bluffs Parkway just near the intersection with Faycon Road. Our Main Street program continued strong, and the board was expanded to include several new citizen members. First Fridays continued to be successful with more than 1,000 in attendance in August alone. First Friday, I believe, is this Friday too. So hopefully the weather will improve a little bit. Main Street Mornings was revived, where businesses, citizens, and government come together to discuss ways to improve business opportunities and our downtown area. Main Street completed the leases for the old drugstore site on Main Street, and soon there will be, hopefully, the construction of a small amphitheater there. The exterior skin was removed from the Jones building, which basically the county took care of that, but it was with the coaxing and interest and encouragement from the DDA, Main Street, and others from the city. They have plans and are getting ready to do some additional restoration of some of the damaged areas on the outside of the building now. And again, Main Street, along with the city, partnered with the Cherokee County Arts Council to hold the 10th Annual Festival of Arts. The 11th begins in May, so keep your eyes open there. Financially this year, the city once again received the Government Finance Officers Association Certificate of Achievement for the 13th consecutive year. And that's an indication of good financial reporting, and also that we're good stewards of your tax money. Again, last year, we had a positive change in our fund balance at the end of 2013. That's also a positive indication that we are carefully monitoring spending. What that means is that we had an approved budget, but we didn't spend all the money that was in that budget. We had money left over to go into the next year, which is what we really want to do. Our Planning and Zoning Department completed an update to our comprehensive land use plan as required by the state and the DCA. This allowed us to maintain our qualified local government status so that we qualify for various state grants. We also engaged Stantec Engineering to do a transportation study and evaluation of our city streets, the needs and cost assessment, some of which you'll hear a little bit about tonight, or at least the status of it. Our newly created Office of Economic Development last year created and published a guide to starting a business in Canton. And Bill Grant and Grant Design helped with that, and for which we are also thankful, appreciate that very much. It's a really, really nice little brochure for someone coming in wanting to start a business in our community. The Economic Development Office also assisted in actually the recruitment of Aldi's grocery store for the River Mill Shopping Center, which is located across from the Lofts over in the North Canton area. These are just a few of the accomplishments of this past year, while we were reducing at the same time the long-term debt and keeping our tax rate low. As you may recall, and of course I definitely recall, that back we had approximately $62 million in long-term debt in January of 2008. At the end of fiscal year 2011, that debt had been reduced to $52.7 million. At the end of fiscal year 2012, we had reduced that debt to $48.8 million. And at the end of fiscal year 2013, which ends September 30th, this past year, we had reduced the debt to $44.5 million. And as of December the 31st, 2013, our debt has been reduced to $41 million, which says that during the past 6 years, we have reduced our long-term debt by more than $21 million, or approximately 34% of it. Now, I'm under no illusion that we are likely to get our debt load down to zero. It won't happen. We have too many needs. But we are at least getting it into a manageable level. To put this into perspective, once again, revenues are up and increasing, while debt is down and decreasing. There's no doubt that the state of our city is improved and improving. A special part of the state of the city is a state of mind. Our vision, our optimism, our excitement about the future, and the level of confidence and trust our citizens have for their city government. My vision for Canton, and everyone has their own ideas, is a broad brush vision. And it includes a lifestyle for our citizens that where Canton is truly their home. When you're here, you're home. You know how it feels when you come back from an extended vacation, if anyone, you guys had one lately at least, and you know, you get home, you go on vacation for rest, but when you get home, gosh, you're kind of tired. What you're really doing is feeling more comfortable, more relaxed, more secure. That's what home is all about. And that's the feeling I want to see all our citizens have for our city. Canton should be a walkable city where everyone has a sidewalk where they can walk. And we can, this bit text, shut up, you know. And we can, and we should be able to walk throughout our city without fear, either day or night. Our families should be, and property should be protected by the best possible police department, fire departments, and all emergency services. And we should have the best possible hospital and medical care. Our city should be an affordable city for all. Our youth can grow up here in a safe environment, get a good education locally, and be able to work here locally when they get through with their education. We have and should have a city where we appreciate the arts and culture, and both are readily and available to all. My vision is all about the opportunities that we as citizens of Canton deserve and desire and are willing to pay for. Our city is the county seat and the heart of Cherokee County. We must lead the way and set an example for other cities. We should not be about rapid growth and development only, but we should say yes only to that development which will enhance our already quality of life. While we should have a walkable city, we should also have a drivable city, free from major delays, like sometimes we have at Canton Marketplace, and free of unsafe traffic conditions. We must have recreational opportunities for all ages and all abilities. We are a welcoming and caring city that is quick to help each other when there's a need. My vision does not include perfection by any means or idealism, but you have to strive to be the best. We can only become what we can visualize, and that's our vision. And we're moving in the right direction now to achieve that vision. We have had some very good council members in the last 6 years that I've been mayor. But I truly must say that today we have the best overall council that we've had, that we have had since my tenure began. However, you really never know for sure. For example, a friend of mine who is a mayor in a small town not too far away, just a few counties over, every time I would see him, he was always bragging about what a good council he had. And I was having some trouble, to tell you the truth, but he was talking about how good they were, how they worked together, and just how they loved their mayor. I mean, it was really, really nice. But you know, the last time I saw him at a meeting just recently, he wasn't quite as chipper or boastful about his relationship. And I asked him what was going on, and he said, well, he said a couple of months before that he had gotten sick and spent a little time in the hospital. And while he was there, he got one of the most beautiful get well cards he'd ever seen from his council. I mean, it really did impress him. Made him feel good. He'd gotten that from his council. So, you know, he said, I felt really, really good about that until, well, when I got back to work and back to City Hall, I found out that get well card was based on a 3-2 vote. Some of these have heard that before. Our council is now working together, and we're respectful of each other. We know that our position as an elected official is not about us. It's not about what we want. We are only conduits for the voices of our citizens. And working together as a council with public input and public participation, we will accomplish even more in the year to come. I would like to thank our staff for a job well done this past year. And the council, of course, I want to express my appreciation to our council, especially Mr. Cummings, who has stepped up to the plate and served as our interim city manager and doing a great job. And I'd like to thank all those of you who serve and participate on various boards or committees, because you're all part of the family of city here. I would like to thank the county too for their cooperation. They've made some things possible that we could not have done alone. And to each of you who are very much regular attendees here at these council meetings, you're part of it, and we thank you for your interest and support. I'd like to thank each and every one of you for the support that you've given this city and made some of our accomplishments possible here. But it's really been the staff that have made it happen. We may have the council tried to provide the tools to do it with, but it's them that actually do the work, and we appreciate that. So thank y'all very much. Under old business, growler stores, we have some discussion on that. Which one we had that? We just moved that. Mr. Cummings, were you gonna bring that one up?
Well, I guess I am.
It's got your name on it.
Yeah, I know. Well, we got the growler ordinance. This is to allow growlers. There's also attached to it the wine tasting and for the farm wineries in there. Actually, I should probably allude to Mr. Dyer, who's written the ordinance, but and I can just give a brief overview. This will allow growlers. There's a few open questions as to, are we going to require a minimum space requirement, and whether or not the tasting license would allow beer and wine tasting citywide. These are decisions that you have to make. First of all, you have to decide whether you want to allow a growler store, and eliminate spacing or set spacing requirements, and then you want it citywide or just within the downtown historic area. A recap of it.
Do you have any comments? I would think that this could be considered a first reading of that ordinance.
Yeah.
Both ordinances. You know,
Okay.
you have the
Should
same-
be a first reading, okay?
But where does it go?
Yeah, that,
I don't need to know any of that. There's a proposed ordinance, just the last time we brought it up, there were questions about different aspects of it, so that's what the questions that Mr. Cummings just read were, is if you don't, I mean, the way it's drafted right now, those questions are answered,
Yeah.
in a certain way.
So does, I'm sorry,
All right,
does it require?
Right now-
Eliminate the 80% floor space requirement?
In downtown,
Just downtown?
just downtown.
That's ground for growlers.
Well, not just growlers, as proposed, the floor space requirement is eliminated for any retail package store. Because that's the kind of license they would have,
but only downtown.
but only downtown.
I have two questions for
Yes,
Mr. Cummings.
yes.
Can I ask Mr. Cummings directly?
Sure.
Mr. Cummings, do we have any prospects for either a wine tasting store or a growler? I mean, was this gentleman that was just here, he wants to open one, is that correct?
Personally, I've only had one person contact me, so I don't know what this gentleman was contacting, Mr. Grant and Mayor Hopgood. I've only had one person contact me that owns a building in another part of town that somebody wants to buy, and this individual owner, which happens to be in the ERC area, doesn't know what kind of business that the prospective buyer wants to open, whether it's a brewery, whether it's a pub. The pub wouldn't be allowed unless it had the food sales. So I have not had anyone specifically approach me relative to opening a growler.
And that leads to my second question, is real simple. I mean, is this, because no one is standing there looking to open one now, is this one of these build it and they will come ideas? And the main reason for asking that question is simple. Do we know that the changes we are proposing to make will make it easy for someone to come in and open either or both of those
Well,
stores?
naturally, the change will allow someone very easily to come in and open both kinds of those stores. The reason we should probably consider this at this time is that we see the trend that's going in other communities where growlers are being opened. Do we want to pass by an opportunity that might come next week because we don't have an ordinance that would allow it?
Yeah, I'm just thinking that maybe, do we query some of the people that are out there that have these things, and that's how we came up with these numbers? I don't know where these come from.
I think Mr. Grant, who's had his hand up over there, I think he
Okay.
might be able to answer part of that, and I
Thank you.
can comment on it as well.
I see personally, I've had two people look at spaces in my building for growler stores in the past 6 months, for instance. There are people actively looking in Canton. We've had people that were looking, we didn't have an ordinance in place, and so they're looking at other cities outside of Canton to do it. So we have interest. We had a wine shop tasting room come and look at spaces in Canton. She got very, very excited until she came to City Hall and found out that we didn't have an ordinance, and also there wasn't a really good system in place. They've been very successful. We have had definite interest in this concept, and as Mr. Cummings alluded to, Woodstock has one now, and I believe our ordinance is we researched other cities who have growler ordinances. Mr. Dyer, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
The growler part, yes, we sort of modeled it on things that allow the floor space requirements. There is no other jurisdiction in Cherokee County that has them other than Canton. So it wasn't so much, so Woodstock, who has a growler store, doesn't have a floor space requirement, but they didn't have it anyway. Cherokee County doesn't have any floor space requirements for package stores. So it was just thought that eliminating that would make it easier.
So does Cherokee County allow, like in a convenience store, you could have the whole thing as alcohol as you wanted to? Or
Yes.
only 2% of it, or whatever? Okay.
100% of it. They don't have any restriction like Canton's ordinance has,
Okay.
that I could find.
Sorry, Bill, go ahead.
I do believe also that our Main Street Director and Economic Development Coordinator have had inquiries or discussions, and I know that Megan Griffin has some information or some thoughts on that she had some last time, and I think we didn't get around to her, but if we want to hear from her.
Sure. Megan?
I just want to be sure that we're going far enough that we are really, in your opinion, Bill, would you have gotten someone interested had this been on our books?
Yes. I mean, there are people interested now, and we probably would, if we had the ordinance in place, we would probably have a ground.
One thing I don't want to get involved with, I remember a couple of years ago, Gene, maybe it was a year and a half ago, when we changed our 60-40 alcohol food ratio for someone that was gonna come in and they turned around and opened in Woodstock, if you remember that.
No, that's true, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, I really would like to have someone actually take advantage of what we're trying to do for them, so.
Well, this will make it easier for them to move in quicker, there's no doubt about it now. We did change the ordinance at the request of someone, but I think all in all, it was probably a good change anyway, so it needed to be done anyway.
Yeah, I'm still not clear as to the rationale on the, not allowing or putting restrictions on outside of the downtown area. There's only a few places even in the downtown area that would qualify for a space to be rented. And therefore, if they to go outside, now they got restrictions. And so I think it's very restrictive to say inside the city or the downtown area, you don't have a lot of choices. Outside the city, the downtown area, you got choices, but you got restrictions. And to me, we're going nowhere with this unless we loosen this thing up a little bit here. Much like the 60-40 thing that we talked about, is that we're building barriers all in every area. And if we're going to do it, let's do it. And take the barriers down.
Well, I understand what you're saying. I would just say that the part of this whole thing, at least from my perspective, has been to try to target downtown and get people coming downtown. It's not been about selling of growlers as much as it has been about getting people downtown, and that's one way to draw them there in that direction.
We just don't have the places. That's my point.
I think we ought to give it a chance. Let's see what happens. You'll have. Anyone else? Megan, I forgot. Sorry about that.
Good evening, Mayor and Council. I'm sure you saw my enthusiasm for the subject back there. I just wanted to take a few minutes to talk about the alcohol ordinances. I know there's been some discussion, and we've had some discussion previously. I do want to say I would respectfully disagree with Mr. Huffman. We do have space available downtown that would suit the needs of a growler store. There's space on North Street. There's the old Soul Food Market. There is some space on East Marietta. And what I want to talk to you about, I know that you've gotten information from Mr. Dyer regarding the decisions that need to be made, but is the economic value that craft breweries offer in the state of Georgia. In 2012, in the entire United States, craft breweries contributed $33.9 billion to the economy. In Georgia, that number is $671 million in 2012, contributed to our state economy. Right now, we have 29 craft breweries open in Georgia, with 7 more opening in the next year. One of those might even be in Canton. Matthew and I are meeting in the next 2 weeks with a local company who wants to open. They have one already open in Snellville, and they're looking to open here in Canton. These craft breweries, obviously, they need a way to get their product to market. and that's where growler stores come in. These stores are not selling Miller Lite, you know, they're selling select beverages from small breweries in our state. This is Georgia grown, or Georgia brewed, if you prefer. And the same can be said for allowing wine shops and farm wineries. We are supporting local business. They are contributing to our economy, and we are building a viable downtown, and that's why we wanted to focus the restrictions, as you call them, and make it so that it benefits our historic downtown. We want people down here. It benefits the Main Street program. It benefits our local organizations. I would sincerely like to encourage the alcohol ordinances as they are written to be approved. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Dyer, let me ask you, this, if this ordinance is approved, it would allow a, quote, just a package store to be open downtown?
The beer and wine package store, yes.
Beer and wine package store. And which would, is not permitted anywhere else in our city.
Correct.
Anyone else?
Well, not less than 1,500 square feet, that's really the only thing that's changing, right? I mean, you can have beer and wine sold in the rest of the city.
But not,
Not
you gotta have
stores.
you gotta have
Yeah,
80%.
certain.
The 80% thing applies to the rest of the city.
Right.
The 80% thing rule is what keeps you from having a store selling only beer and wine. And so the difference with what you're talking about is selling regular beer, or like Budweiser.
But now, a growler store, and did I understand that it only stuff brewed in Georgia, or
I don't think that's marketing more than.
It's marketing.
marketing? What about the wine stores? Is that just Georgia?
The farm wineries have to be a Georgia farm winery, yes.
So does this ordinance mandate that it is a farm winery?
No, there's two different things going on. We're using wine shops and all. Wine shops are allowed now. The only thing we're taking for a wine shop would be the 80% floor space. To let somebody just sell wine.
Any kind of wine?
Any kind of wine, bottles of wine. The Georgia Farm Winery is actually a state license. We don't even actually grant the license. We just allow them here. What that means is a Georgia winery can have a tasting room at the winery, and they can have 5 other locations throughout the state. We're allowing one of those 5 to be here, which means it's a tasting room for that winery. They're actually allowed to sell their samples under the state law. But it would be a local location for it. You know, one of the wineries in Delaware, for instance, could come down and have people sample theirs. So that's a state license. We would just be permitting them here.
Okay, would Ingles be able to have wine tastings?
Yes. Under the proposed ordinance, the wine tasting license is available to any package store. When I call it package store, it's retail package, which is Ingles, Publix, anybody selling beer and wine.
Mr. Gunn?
But, if I read it correctly, Publix would not be allowed to have a growler.
Correct. No.
Because they're outside of the downtown area.
Well, actually they would, because they would meet the floor space requirements.
So you could have anywhere.
They could have a row of growler there, yes.
So the only thing that we're really doing by this ordinance is we're reducing the floor space requirement relative to the historic district.
Correct.
That's all of it.
That's really what we're doing, right?
That's really all it accomplishes. Anybody else that meets the floor space requirement could also have wine tasting or could have a growler.
Correct.
So
We had to put growler in, and then we changed the floor space. Right.
So we essentially really aren't limiting it to downtown.
Just a separate growler store that would be harder to do outside because of the floor space.
Yeah.
But a grocery store, in fact, the first inquiry we had in the city about growlers was from Walgreens 3 or 4 years ago. They were considering doing it.
Now, why would that be, tell me why that would be hard? Why would that be difficult to do?
If you were just gonna be growler and not Publix or selling it, if you just wanna sell beer, you don't really wanna sell other things. We require 80% of the floor space to be other products. If you're there just selling beer, what's your other 80% gonna be?
But it would be easy you're saying it'd be easy for a drugstore to do that.
A grocery store, the ones that are already meeting the floor space requirement, correct? Not the freestanding separate growler store outside the city limit ordinance. You're not
A
gonna.
freestanding one, yeah, I see what you're saying, yeah.
It's only a growler store.
Mr. Grant?
I also think it's, I may be wrong on this, but I think it'd be very economically unfeasible for grocery stores and things to do growlers, and it's a very different business model. It's very different from selling 6-packs and 12-packs in cases.
Which is why they didn't do it.
Exactly.
They asked, and then it dropped.
Mr. Rudd?
I had one question, it's primarily for Megan. The craft brewery that's considering locating in Canton, is their only distribution method through a growler, or will they be selling it through wholesale or any other method, or is it strictly?
That's by state law, which, and we have the 3-tier system in Georgia. They have to sell through a distributor.
So they would have to, even the growler stuff would have to go through a distributor?
These growler stores have to buy from a distributor, correct?
Oh, so that would, even though they both might be in Canton, they would have to still have a middleman?
Yes.
Okay.
And if I'll go ahead and say this now, because I've been asked a couple of times about breweries, we would have to change our ordinance to allow a brewery, because we don't have manufacturing in our ordinance. We would have to put manufacturing in. Well, zoning would be a different issue, but our alcohol ordinance doesn't even contemplate a manufacturing license, so we would have to put that in.
Does our ordinance allow a brewery to actually brew and sell now?
Well, no, we would have to put in, the brewery is the manufacturer, would be called the ordinance, so we have to put in manufacturing. Their ability to sell would be dictated by state law.
So we can't have a brewery selling food and.
That's a brew pub, we can have that.
We can.
And we already have brew pub in the ordinance.
Okay.
I was wondering if this ordinance was modeled after another city's ordinance who has had success with growlers and wine tasting stores.
The growler part, I lifted from a city that I knew had growlers. And it's pretty much uniform, everybody's doing it the same way, as far as the definitions. The floor space requirement, we have it in most places that had growler didn't have it at all anyway. So the floor space is Coming actually has growlers and 75%. I don't know if they have growler store in Cumming or not. They do have both.
May I ask Ms. Ribbon a question?
Sure.
Does this ordinance gel with what you've heard growler store owners want? Will this meet their needs?
It does, and it has, and it's also, and I spoke with Brian Stockton, and just come up there real quick.
Thank you.
The way we wrote this, Bobby wrote this, and this, we spoke a lot on the phone, or I did, with Woodstock. We looked at several other cities that had with ground ordinances, and in speaking with Brian today, our ordinance is so similar. He told me that Barrel and Barley, their growler store that they have, has actually expanded their business. It's been that successful. So this is what growler store owners want. This will be viable in our downtown.
And the limitations on floor space is not a problem?
We're eliminating that.
We're
You're
eliminating
eliminating
that.
that,
That's
that's
what we
downtown.
And then also the size of 1,500 square feet, we're eliminating that for downtown.
And this meets the requirements of
Yes.
the wishes for business owners.
So, could I ask a question? Would you see a business opening up outside of the downtown area with these limitations, outside of a grocery store?
No, because it's not, we don't allow for it, really. I mean, unless they were going
No,
to.
if they had to, they gotta do the 80.
If they do the 80%, then yes, they could do it.
Yeah, but with that limitation, they have to abide by that limitation.
Right.
From a business standpoint, can you foresee a store opening up just as a growler wine store?
I think it'd be very difficult for them to do that.
That's my point.
Well, that's our point, is that it's difficult outside of downtown, and that's why we want to encourage the activity and revitalization right down there.
I understand we want to encourage the activity, but at the cost of restricting other areas, I just don't think that's right. and I disagree with Ms. Griffith. I don't believe that all that many spaces are available downtown.
Anyone else? Okay. All right, this will be on our agenda for the March 20th meeting.
And Susan, can we break those into two different agenda items, bring the farm winery in?
Okay. All right, let's see here. Okay, discussion of the quality assurance, quality control, review on, for the wastewater treatment plant. Which one? Oh, I skipped that one. Oh, yeah. Discussion of the rental car tax, yeah. That's basically, it appeared at the last, meeting and discussion about this, but there was still some unanswered questions about that. And I wanted to make sure that there was no one that, had any questions on that. It worked out. And I wouldn't consider this a first reading on the ordinance.
I had questions, and I talked to Bobby this afternoon and got,
You got your answers?
I think so, yes, sir.
Okay. Does anyone else have any questions, Mr. Cummings?
Well, just one thing that I went and did a lot of additional research, and I found that the usage of this, even though it was conveyed in here that it was primarily for economic development, that it's a pretty wide area where you could use the funds generated from here. And for example, we could use it towards building a public safety building. So it's a lot, we became more knowledgeable about its usage than what I anticipated, or what I thought it was limited to the last time.
So if we have any excess left over after we give a whole lot of it to
Well, I
economic
think
development,
that-
we could do that?
I would think it'd be a budgeting process, and maybe it would be the excess left over from the public safety bill. Who knows, in the budget workshop, what's gonna happen?
Mr. Grant?
Just want to say another question. We were in Athens this past weekend for the GMA training, and one of the presentations was from Larry Hanson, city manager of Valdosta. I think he's been there for 30 years, and he's also the GMA's expert on taxation and alternative revenue sources other than raising property taxes. And he gave a number of great overviews of different taxation models. He mentioned hotel motel tax and several others, and taxes on insurance, I think, which we all have. And he did mention rental car tax or excise tax, and so I followed up with him on the email afterwards, just to ask him if he thought, how he thought that worked, because none of us likes taxes, but his response, I'll read, says, "I think it's a great idea and a good source of revenue. I particularly like that you're designating the new revenue for a particular purpose and being for Main Street and economic development, which are both economic development related. Your concept is good public policy." And then I asked him to elaborate on that and as it relates to some of the remarks from the last meeting. And he said, number one, it is a pass-through. Rental cars don't pay it, they collect it. Number two, it applies to all companies and is pretty common elsewhere, so it's a level playing field. And three, using the proceeds for economic development will create more jobs, more visitors, more prospects, thus more rental cars. It's a win-win for everyone. So, again, here's an expert, and they have it in Valdosta. I think they have it, statewide in a lot of cities. So, again, I think it's a great revenue source. We want more businesses downtown, and there would be people that it would impact, but I think the overall good that it could create for economic development and top line growth would benefit all the citizens of Canton.
Mr. Huffman?
It is definitely a tax. It'll probably be a tax to the Canton citizens in the neighborhood of first year of $160,000 tax. It is not a pass-through in Canton. I did not say that it wasn't in Valdosta. I can't speak for Valdosta. But the gentleman from Enterprise, which is the sole business except for a small one next door, has brought the numbers here. They are hard numbers, they're not soft numbers. 95% are collected from Canton citizens that are not pass-throughs. So that is, may be true for Valdosta. It is not true for this city if we choose to collect that tax from our citizens. So, I think that, given a choice, we already as a council, as a city, do some funding for Main Street. And we want to continue to do things for Main Street. But I don't think Main Street, in fact, I know when this thing came up just a year ago, that we were talking maybe collecting $30,000–40,000. This council had no idea how much money was really there. It's $160,000. That was if they collected as of last year what they ran through their business down there. He did not want that to be public, but he being a good corporate citizen understands. What he does say this, is that the major issue is, as far as this city right now, is in the area of public safety, which is the fire up at the Laurel Canyon area. Given a choice, as much as I like downtown, given a choice, I think the money is better spent there. And we can have our fire station almost immediately to get going with that tax. That gentleman, who is a good corporate citizen, said, you know, I can see that as being put to a good use. To just put it to Main Street. What is Main Street? What is it they're going to spend it on? Here's $160,000. Tell me how you're going to spend it. Now, I know this man over here is, when you spend a dollar of his money, or he wants to know where it's going, and I believe in that. If we send it to the fire department or build a fire station, we know where it's going. Main Street, I don't know, Bill, maybe y'all can fill me in on exactly how it's going to be spent. And but given a choice between the two, I think that this fire station has been on the books for I don't know how many years we've been talking about it, and it is a tax that is not passed through versus the hotel motel tax. When you pay that, it's usually probably 95% of the time is a person staying overnight that does not have a residence here to stay in. So that is truly a pass-through. It's paid by somebody outside of the city, where on this tax, it's paid by citizens inside the city. Big difference. Mr. Russ?
Well, Hookie, thank you for sharing the confidential information with us, because it puts in perspective the size of the amount of money that this will generate for the city of Canton. In my conversation this afternoon with Bobby, certainly public safety uses for these funds are available to us. And just because it's $160,000, that doesn't mean all of it's going to go to the Main Street program. You are going to, and I am going to participate in a budgeting process, and we're going to decide where that money goes. And maybe the good news is that we could actually put this into effect 30 days after we pass it. We don't have to wait till October 1st. That's something Bobby told me this afternoon. So the other thing I'd just like to say about Bill's comment about Larry Hansen, this was one of the sharpest guys I think I've ever heard speak on government and taxation. Absolutely excellent guy. I went up to Myra Register. She was putting on the whole program, and I said, well, we're looking for a city manager in the city of Canton. Can you tell me where I can find a mini Larry Hansen? And she said, well, if you asked him, he would say me. I worked for him for 17 years. She was also an extremely sharp lady. She works for Carl Vinson, I think. Very, very sharp. Excellent program. Larry was one of the most outstanding. This guy, I don't think he would have needed a note to speak for his hour and a half or whatever it was. He was phenomenal and excellent, and I'm happy to have participated in that program. Thank you.
I will not take anything away from the gentleman. I sat at the table for half a day with the gentleman.
Larry Hansen.
really.
Yeah.
Really, I did. So at one of the events,
Okay.
the mayor's day, when the mayor's day.
He's really good.
He's very good.
30 years and
Unfortunately,
39 years. He's
it could
worked
be
there
40,
40.
it could be 40 years.
39
The point I was trying to make, John, he's still wrong. The gentleman that came up from, were you here last meeting?
I haven't missed a meeting.
Okay, for some reason I was drawing a blank, but that gentleman had the numbers. I mean, read them. He's not wrong.
The gentleman you're referring to, who is?
The gentleman from Enterprise.
Okay.
Let me make one comment, and we're gonna move on, is that I think this council certainly not only has a right to know how this money would be spent if this is approved, but an obligation to know. I mean, that's our responsibility. I mean, we're not gonna turn something loose without knowing what it is. Now, I understand what you said, Mr. Rust, about it could be implemented 30 days or so from the passage. My feeling is it makes more sense probably to implement it at the beginning of the fiscal year. Now, that gives you time to go through all the budgeting process so that everyone is on board with how it's gonna be spent, too. And it gives everybody, time to prepare the collections and, our end of it as well. Go ahead.
I'm not arguing that we should do it in 30 days, but one advantage of that would be, Gene, is pretty simple. We would have a flow of funds. We'd kind of have an idea when budgeting came through as to what we're really looking at. If 160,000 is it 15,000, 14,000 a month that we're having, and you'd see that and we'd be able to budget. We can't really plan in the dark. We're planning in the dark October 1st if it's implemented October 1st. And that is an advantage.
We could do like the state does and have a supplementary budget, come back and make a budget amendment. If we saw we were getting $100,000 a month instead of $20,000 a month, we could certainly appropriate some more of that to different areas and adjust our budget, I think, accordingly, probably.
It's 3% of easy to figure.
Yeah, none of us knew that until you just shared that with us.
And that was, the gentleman must not have been here because the gentleman shared some of that last week.
He said that number? I didn't.
Yeah, he said 160.
I missed that.
I did too.
That one.
I was here, I didn't hear that.
Okay.
Did you get that, Susan?
Let's move along. That will be moved over to our March 20th meeting. Okay. The next one is, which one are we doing that? Quality assurance. Quality assurance, quality control review on the wastewater treatment plant design. Mr. Cummings, you will talk about that?
Yes, last meeting and was pushed off to this meeting or because it was considered a separate agenda item and hadn't been on a work session. So what it is a standard practice, or it is a standard function to perform a quality assurance, quality control review of a design before you go through or have be simultaneous with the construction of a large project. The wastewater treatment plant is an $8 million project. We spent approximately $437,000 on the design, and I'm recommending that we do a QA/QC review of that design. And what that QA/QC review does is it actually reviews the engineering calculations for the design that were done. It reviews the plan, in this case, for the future expansion of the plant. It reviews the drawings and specifications for conformance with regulatory requirements and industry accepted standards, and attempts to identify potential major issues that may arise during construction. And the vendor is a third-party vendor relative to the design. It's not the city and it's not the designer. It's a third-party vendor, and they will provide recommendations to correct any major potential issues that may be identified. And they'll prepare a report with the findings. It is not a change in the design. It just goes through and it is a double check of the design, and it allows us an opportunity at the front end to see potential issues rather than waiting till the plant is totally constructed and then experience the issue. It's a $30,000 cost, but to me, on relative to an $8 million project, it's $30,000 well spent. They may find nothing, but if they find nothing wrong with the design, we can go to sleep at night knowing that we're moving ahead with an $8 million project, rather than 18 months down the road finding something that could have been noticed at the front end. So that's the scope of it.
Well, I think in reality, that level of project, it certainly cannot hurt anything, and I think it can be beneficial to have another level of assurance that we're okay with that type of thing. So I tend to agree with Mr. Cummings that $30,000 is probably a small price to pay for that assurance that we would give at that point. Yes.
I'm just curious, Mr. Mayor, the last meeting you weren't in favor of.
I was not.
Tell me the reason for changing.
I talked to Mr. Cummings at length about exactly what it would do. And, it was brought up at the last meeting. If you know, it wasn't even on the agenda. So nobody knew anything about it. I mean, when you start talking about spending $30,000 or $40,000 and it's not on the agenda, I kind of want to know what it was about, a little bit more about what they would do and this sort of thing. So
Did you go
I feel
back-
very comfortable now with it.
Did you go back and read the things that you had not had the opportunity to read?
I did, and I signed that. Now, that's not this, you understand, that's not this. That was the ESI contract, okay, which was construction management, okay? That's been signed, that's been gone.
Okay, I didn't know whether it had or had not.
Yes, it has. Anyone else? Let's cut this right.
Come on, ask.
Come on, right.
I just want to make a comment. I'm pleased that you're going to support this, so that's great. Thank you.
I changed my mind once.
Well,
Not often.
that's
not
what we
often.
do here. We come in here with open minds and.
Haven't changed it on the wheel car tax yet.
Well,
That's, you hadn't noticed.
That's a coincidence too,
Yeah, I may have.
that the rental car tax is back on the agenda, and so we bring this back on the agenda at the same time, but that's,
Stranger things have happened.
oh, yeah, I know, it's very strange.
Anyone else? Okay, that'll be on the agenda for the next meeting. Still under old bit, let's see, no, it's
Yep, still under old business, streets.
streets, yeah.
Yes.
Update on the unfinished street project by Stantec.
Stantec is, yeah, that was moved by Mr. McCrew. Stantec, conducted a thorough analysis of 12 subdivisions, and they focused on unfinished streets. There's an attachment in your packet that identifies the unfinished street. It'll tell you the number of lots, the number of houses on that street. It also goes through and estimates the length of the street, and the cost to finish that street. What is not in the release document yet is where we have bonds in place. So those bonds the amount of those bonds have to be matched against this to see what the total financial impact would be should the city decide to finish these streets. The total cost, and I've got to clarify a little bit, in looking at those finished streets, there are certain streets we have on our books that are classified private streets, or we've classified them as private streets. There is some question as to whether they are private or they are public streets. In any respect, two numbers were generated one number for what was definitely known to be public streets, and it would take approximately $1.6 million to finish those streets. And if we include the streets that are classified as private streets on our books, if they had to be finished by the city, it would cost approximately $341,000 more. This will be a continuing discussion once we get the maintenance in there, and we'll need to decide, are we going to address these? Mr. Grant mentioned to me earlier tonight there was supposed to be a priority established at road when we talked about the original study. No priority's been provided. I'll have to follow up on that. But if we do decide to finish these streets, there is a way that they can be funded. They could be funded out of SPLOST 6 money. There's approximately $6 million in SPLOST 6 for streets. I guess it's a little broader than just streets, but it can be used for streets, of which approximately $1 million has been used or committed. That would leave $5 million. So there is sufficient funds in there if this council so chooses to address these streets. The issue becomes that we have a time limit over the approximately, I think, in about 4 years or 4.5 years left on SPLOST 6, so we'd have to do it within that time frame to use the money. But that's just an update.
Let me ask one question. You mentioned the $341,000 if you included the private streets that we theoretically consider maybe private streets.
That's correct.
The $341,000, is that just for, does that include upgrading these streets to city specifications?
No,
or what does
sir.
it do?
No, sir. The street has been put in the master plan a certain way and has been approved according to certain conditions. And to me, it's a variance from our code. The question in the study was to look at what it would take and bring the street to finished condition as submitted in the master plan, not according to code. So for example, one of the private streets in Great Sky, I'll use this as an example, is Wooded Mountain Trail. Wooded Mountain Trail is designated in the master plan as a one-sided street. That's one thing that's designated. And the description of the street and the actual street, there's nowhere that says Wooded Mountain Trail is a private street. But if you look at the description of Wooded Mountain Trail and match it to the physical or the description in the master plan as to what a private street is, and you look at Wooded Mountain Trail, it matches identically. The width, no curbs, no gutters, or street, storm drains. So it matches identically to the description as submitted in the master plan. That's where they conclude this was meant to be a private street, although it isn't specifically identified by name. If we were to address it, and the amount of money for that particular street is $30,146, that would only be to address the surface and deliver it as it is described in submission of the master plan. I think that
Yeah, you did, that answered it.
It doesn't change the condition of the street as to sidewalks or any of that.
It's just pretty much resurfacing, basically.
It's pretty much just resurfacing, that's correct.
Ms. McGrew?
2 questions. On Wooded Mountain Trail, would that take care of the crumbling edges, because it is crumbling badly? Or would that be cleaned up and edged?
A lot of the reason for the crumbling edges is because there is no curb. So would it take care of the current condition? Yes, but how long before it needed to be done again would be the real question. To me, this is just putting a surface down and repairing where those edges have deteriorated. They're gonna continue, if you put a service down, they're gonna continue to deteriorate as cars drive on the edge of those and so forth, because there's no curb or nothing to retain that.
Second question.
Yes, Stantec, according to Mr. Cummins, did not give us a priority order. If they don't have that available, would we have to pay them to put that priority order? If we did it ourselves, how would we come to that conclusion?
Well, there's a couple of problems with the priority order. I mean, I imagine they could prioritize it, but how are they gonna prioritize one subdivision over another, for example? Unless they said, well, this is the worst condition street, do it first. But I think that's a bad way to go about it, for the simple reason, the worst condition street could have undeveloped lots, or could have developed lots at the end of it that are unfinished, and you wouldn't wanna finish that street and have heavy construction traffic going down as the economy turns. So, I told Mr. Grant I'd look and see if they were supposed to prioritize it. My preference would be is we should prioritize it, which streets we would address first based on a multitude of factors, if at all we're gonna address any of them out of Splost.
Mr. Cummings, I'm not sure whether I'm recalling correctly or not, but I seem to remember that when we were talking to Stantec, that basically that they had some piece of equipment that they were gonna bring from another city somewhere, which would rate all of our streets. It drives over it, and computerized, actually tells which streets are and basically in what condition they were gonna be in, and that would be used in to prioritize those, or to rate them, the worst to the best. Am I thinking about somebody else?
No, that was, I believe that was there. I do not have the results of that. I'll have to ask, Mr. West,
Their president.
is he here? Is Stantec here too, Joe?
While they're coming up, can I ask Mr. Cummins a quick question? Wooded Mountain Trail, I don't see a number.
Well, the problem was it was left out, and
So it's 36,000?
it's 30,146, and the other one that was left out was Morning Breeze Lane at 16,659.
Give me that number again, please.
16,659.
Mr. Mayor, council members, Stantec was retained as the demand services transportation consultant for the city of Canton. In regards to the unfinished streets project that they are working on now under this task order, they are looking at all of the streets in regards to coming up with how many vacant lots there are versus built lots, the width of the street, come up with how much it's gonna cost to finish topping of all of those streets. What you're talking about, Mr. Mayor, with the other piece of equipment was something that they said they could come in and do that would give a rating for the street itself, and not necessarily a priority or a suggestion of which streets council might consider to move forward as far as the finished topping in a ranking system, and there's several options related to that. But what you remembered from the initial presentation would be another task order and another assignment for that actual street rating with that side-looking radar system that would determine the thicknesses of the asphalt and any voids, if you will, and give a complete rating for the what's there itself.
I was of the same opinion you were.
Yeah, wouldn't you expect that really that type of rating or some type of evaluation of each and every street, which I assume that's what that would do, would be a basis for prioritization? I mean, it looks like you'd want to take the ones that were in the worst shape and try to address them first.
The Stantec representatives are here as well, if you want to let them come up and address some of this and that sort of thing. But in regards to priorities, to just doing the finish topping on the streets, and their research, the majority of the unfinished streets are in fairly decent shape. They have noted a few areas where there would be some cracking or a little deep patching that would have to occur, and that sort of thing, but for the most part, they're in fairly decent shape, and just doing that 1.5-inch finish topping would be sufficient. The side looking radar, if you will, with that van and all would look at all of the streets and tell you about thicknesses and that sort of thing. But if council wants to.
Anyone have any particular questions you want to ask of them?
Well, I was under the same opinion you were, that was kind of.
Well, I do understand what Ken was saying there, and it was something I know they said they could do. Maybe that's maybe not what we engaged them to
Right,
do.
right.
That's the problem, but I think, I'm thinking that's something that should be.
Well, for this task order, in regards to bringing that other piece of equipment in and doing all 90-something miles of streets, in regards to the condition of the existing paving and everything underneath it, that sort of thing, the initial proposal was in the $70,000 or $80,000 range, if that's my recollection.
Okay. Mr. Grant?
Again, Stantec personnel are here.
Do, Mr. Pan, in your opinion, would we have the information as far as our staff making recommendations of where we should start? Even if we had the money to do them all, we have to start somewhere. The issue I would see is that we have council members who live in these neighborhoods, and it seems to me that we need some objective point of view, or a third party, but if you guys would have the information to at least recommend where we start.
And part of this task order would include some suggestions for priorities for completing the resurfacing of these streets. Tonight's presentation that Stantec was here to present was the initial presentation to give you initial information, because we're still working on tying up everything in regards to the bond issue and the bond program, come back with some finite numbers and suggestions, as well as some suggested methods for prioritizing completing these unfinished streets.
So, may I?
Go ahead.
So, to better understand this, the $1.6 million, that's to do all the public streets, and that would be resurfacing all the public streets that we've got listed on this sheet?
I believe so, yes, sir. And there was an error in the original, and we sent a corrected version.
Okay. So understanding you and the gentleman I spoke with him before the meeting, that our streets are not in real bad shape. I'm sure we got some that are, but in general, he said, you know, you're not terribly bad. And you go to these private streets, or the ones that got numbers out beside, it's 341,000, which is a number that we can surely live with a lot better than $1.6 million. And even at that, if we pulled out a portion of that $1.6 million, that indeed does need maybe the scanner or the x-ray machine or whatever it is to come in and determine. You know, we could be looking at maybe just $1 million and make some significant inroads in making our streets better, in particular these areas that are unfinished.
What is the total miles on the 1.6 million? Ken, do you have that?
18,558. That's just what I'm reading. That's the width. That's
18.5.
Oh, that's it.
18.558 miles.
I'm just trying to read what I got. Yeah.
That is those streets that are proposed for city maintenance, as well as those that are either by recorded plat, other mechanisms shown as private streets. Again, Soleil at Laurel Canyon was not included in this, as the homeowners association has been completing those streets along as construction's taking place.
They're not public streets, are they?
No, sir, those are private streets.
Most definitely private streets, yeah.
Yes, sir,
They have a
because,
gate.
behind the gate, but they are completing those streets, so those streets were not part of this task order. And again, you know, some of the Stantec personnel are here that can address questions that you might have of what has been done by them so far.
Yeah.
The other thing, I was gonna ask about the streets that are listed, what was designated private. I guess in our minds, I see there are some indication, but I'm only seeing on this list that 5 are indicated as private. Is that correct? And that seems incorrect to me.
There's some that he didn't mark,
Where any street that,
Anything that is shaded is a private street.
we're not shaded.
we're not shaded, unfortunately.
I mean, there's some here that have private in parentheses, but there's only 5 streets listed as private.
Right.
So-
Well, that's on the last page.
So, what I'm looking at shows 15 private streets.
Yeah, it's probably closer to the number.
Does anyone need,
I have one question for Mr. Patton. Ken, I think you probably know these streets better than any of us here. And you are intimately familiar with what Stantec has provided us. I hate to put you on the spot here, but what would you recommend we do with this?
Well, this is just an initial presentation. We expect to come back in April and present information and refine this original information here to include the bond program and what they have found about bonds and working with the staff in regards to bonds, how that's going to affect the overall price and that sort of thing. One of the things that and I have been eminently involved with this for the better part of 2 years in trying to get a handle on this issue and this problem on behalf of the mayor and city council. And as people are still coming in and drawing building permits, it's getting further away, if you will, and that sort of thing, in which we're losing abilities to get bonds and other things of that nature, if you will, and, you know, ultimately, the decision is gonna have to be made, how city council is gonna finish these streets. But,
I'm sorry.
this is just an initial presentation to, give you, if you will, how many miles of streets there are in, at today's cost.
It's
When I
like the-
presented the initial information, 2 years ago, that was at approximately 16 miles of unfinished streets, and a little over $1 million was the number that I had worked up at that point in time. But this is a much more detailed and refined effort than what I was able to do 2 years ago in regards to cost.
As long as these gentlemen have come all the way over to attend our meeting, I'd love to hear if they have something that they'd like to contribute or add to the conversation.
Randall Parker from Stantec will come up and he'll talk about what they've been doing and
Don't need that folder.
hopefully maybe shed some light on some of the questions.
You asked for it, okay? It's your fault.
Put the folder down.
Mayor and council, people, I really appreciate you that we have the opportunity to talk to you about it. I actually went out and looked at every single one of the streets in 12 subdivisions to determine what the conditions were, concentrating on the streets that had not been completed. Now, our study centers and really just covers the streets that are not finished, that were never finished originally. They are missing the top 1.5 inches of pavement. So I appreciate the suggestion about using our machine to go around and check things, but that's really not applicable to this situation. That's used more for existing streets that have been completed and have been there for some time. My observation, based on my experience, years of experience, is that there are very few areas on the uncompleted streets in these subdivisions that are going to require more than just spot patching and then the pavement coating. They're not in bad condition now. They're bad condition to drive on because I'm sure you all know you have lips sitting up that your tires are going to hit. But once the topping goes in, that will solve most of those problems. In terms of the private streets, we have tried to use the information that the city had, and with some of these other suggestions, we found a couple of streets in the process of looking at them that we questioned, is this a public street, is this a private street? There are no houses on it, and from that determination, we've tried to take a stab at which are in fact public streets now and which are private streets. And so I've provided that information by subdivision, what it appears it would cost to complete a subdivision, including both public and private streets, and then the private streets separately. If in fact there's a mechanism to have those taken care of separately. In terms of the number of private streets, if you look on the second page, you'll notice there are some subdivisions where all the streets are considered private at this point. The villages at River Point, for instance, River Green Commons, and in the Diamond Ridge subdivision, the only unpaved streets are designated as private streets. All the rest of the streets are completed, the ones that would be public streets. So I've tried to break that out as much as I can in terms of the prioritization. We would like to help you prioritize which streets need to be done first. But my suggestion is that you look and see how much the bond money is available, how much of other agreements with, I'm sure there will be developers that will come in and want to complete a section of a subdivision or a section of a street, how much of that they would cover. And then when you get down to the bottom line, this is what we don't have other sources to cover. Then I think we need to look and say, okay, where do we start? That's a good point. And maybe that's something you are going to have to decide. I can give you suggestions. I can say, why don't we look at the streets where we have the most houses, and the least vacant lots, and maybe prioritize that way. But in terms of actual condition, there isn't really that much difference between the streets in these subdivisions at this point. And the longer you wait, the more they're going to deteriorate without that top coat.
How many subdivisions you say you looked at?
12.
So, were there 12? Not all of them had no top coated, did they?
Not all the streets in those subdivisions were uncompleted. Some of them, like Diamond Ridge, about 80, 90% complete. There's really 2 streets that aren't completed there. But there are others, like the villages of River Point, where none of the streets are top. That's up behind the Walmart. So, you have a range of things. River Green, as you probably know, there's a number of streets that are completed, beautiful, and there are some that aren't. One of the biggest ones that we have talked about is the River Bend Way, which doesn't really have any lots on it, but it's uncompleted. And so it will need to be finished. And that's the type of guidance, Great Scotch, similar thing, Great Sky Parkway has a long stretch that's not topped yet, but with no actual lots on it.
But the ones that you mentioned just prior to Great Sky, there are no houses on it. Could we not, when they start building houses, collect to have the street?
I think the one he's referring to is in my neighborhood.
Right.
There will never be a house built on that street. It's just not ever planned. It's not planned. I'll ignore that. It is not planned. And Ken, you know that street well. I know that street well. There was never any houses planned on that street. It's a unique street in our neighborhood. But I have one question for you. and I'm gonna interrupt you. But, I have an expert that told me, and we have always lived with for the 10 years I've lived in River Green, the fact that under the construction process, it's better to have a street unfinished until it's finished, meaning the build-out is finished, because the construction, heavy trucks and everything beat down that top coat, and destroy the top coat. And I've had someone else tell me that putting the top coat on actually makes the streets stronger. What's your opinion?
They're both correct. Traditionally, we don't put down a top coat until the heavy construction is finished in order to preserve the finish once we do put down the top coat. But at the same time, without the top coat, the street is not complete. It is not as strong as it will be once the top coat goes in place.
So the heavy trucks, once the top coat, if they put the top coat down right, what's the logic for even waiting then? Why not just make them all put them down right away?
Well, some would argue that that's probably the best thing to do nowadays, when you don't know when the subdivision is going to be completed. Traditionally, you have a short timeline when you're building, say a year or two, when you're building out a subdivision, and so leaving them unpaved through that time period, and then coming back when you're finished makes sense.
Nobody expected 10-year build-outs.
No.
Yeah.
You would also have a performance bond, you know, posted and ready and available if something happened there to that development, which is one of our problems.
And that may be, you know, one of the things you've asked us to do is come back with recommendations. That may be one of the recommendations, is that with today's economy, maybe you should require that top coat go down. You know, even though that didn't make good business sense before, in order to make sure that other subdivisions do get completed.
You could still have put the top coat down, you'd still have a maintenance bond after that. So, I mean, after a year's worth of traffic, even if there was still some construction traffic on it, you ought to know if the base is gonna hold up, or, you know, if there's gonna be problems with it, I would think.
I think Ken alluded to this, the fact that the building permits are picking up complicates the process a little bit. Our good luck in terms of those kind of fees that we're getting from that is really a blessing sometimes in disguise, or a bad thing in disguise, because we've got a problem that keeps multiplying in terms of trying to get those streets built out. And the more you let in, the more problem you got, I think, my situation.
It's a time-sensitive situation, where the longer you wait, the worse it's gonna get.
Anyone else have a question? Ken?
Yes, sir, Mr. Mayor, council members. The last thing is that I want to let council members know that Joby West and I, over the last few weeks, have had some initial discussions with development entities that have come in and begun discussions, if you will, in regards to what has to be done in some of these areas where we have unfinished streets. We will be putting together some information to get the interim city manager in regards to some of these proposals, in regards to bonding and or finishing streets and that sort of thing, and all, which ultimately will affect the final product or decision that Stantec does make in regards to bonds, and whether there's gonna be an add-on fee, or if the city's gonna do it out of SPOS funds, or some combination of all of the above and that sort of thing. But I did wanna make you aware that we have had some initial discussions on about 4 or 5 developments. We actually had a builder that bought all the unbuilt lots on one street in a development, and he has bonded that street and will pave it before he completes and gets all of his COs. And that one of these streets? I believe so, yes, sir. So we just wanted to get some information to you about, if you will, preliminary costing and that sort of thing, and the length of the streets that's involved with this issue. And we will be coming back very shortly with additional information.
One thing that might help, Ken, when you finally get the numbers, it's a little bit like a big jigsaw puzzle trying to figure out which one you want to do first, but what might really help is that if we know what the bonding is, there might be communities that are almost all bonded, So it would be a small amount to finish one community, regardless of what the detriment is to the streets themselves. You'd say, well, we got this one done, because the bonding money almost covered all of it, so we'll get that one done. So that would really help us deciding which way where to put the money.
And that's part of these discussions that we've had with some entities. There's one with one of our larger master plan developments that has made an initial proposal in regards to finishing all of the streets within that development. And we will be getting that information to Mr. Cummins and on to City Council. Like I said, we've done it on a case-by-case basis as folks have come into our offices. But I did want to make you aware that there are some other things that ultimately are at work and at play in regards to bonding. In regards to the amount of active bonds that are on file with the city, seems to be with just a few of these 12 subdivisions.
Okay, thank you, Ken. Let's move on to new business. Presentation of the Unified Development Code and scheduling of the work sessions to discuss that. Mr. Cummins?
You've all got a notebook, with probably 800 pages of Unified Development Code, and that's about all I'm gonna tell you is we need to schedule work sessions to go through this. Schedule the first one tonight if you so choose, or we can just make you aware of it.
I would suggest that we have the city clerk get in touch and set something up in the next week or two, at least to get started on that. My guess is it's gonna take several of them.
Unless you're a fast reader.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the only person sitting here that's, other than Ken, has looked at every page. I don't look forward to doing that again, so. Oh, you have too? Oh, good, Bobby. So you could be part of that. Good. No,
Okay,
it's exciting reading, I can tell you.
Sure. Our city clerk will schedule a work session for that. Okay, the next item, fire suppression tap fees. Mr. Cummins.
There's an attachment in your packet, and there's a major difference between how we charge tap fees and how other entities surrounding, specifically addressed with Cherokee County Water and Sewer Authority. They break out separately fire suppression tap fees. We do not. So if we have a business that is considered locating within the city or on the edge of the city and need a 6-inch tap for just a fire suppression because of codes, they'll pay $7,500 in the county, and they would pay in the city $28,500. My proposal is to set up a separate fire suppression tap fee scale that is equal to that which Cherokee County has, and that shows in the 2 pages in your chart.
Okay, anyone else have a question? Okay.
Just a quick question, would that really significantly impact the funds that we collect?
We had one last year
Oh, that's instant.
That answered that.
with a 6-inch line tap, so it really doesn't, but and that was a multi-business. If you get a single business, it may be a competitive disadvantage to locate in the city between $28,500 and $7,500. And all those costs. But anyway, that will be on the next agenda.
Okay. Next item, discussion of the urban redevelopment plan resolution of need.
That's also in here. That's from Matthew Thomas. It's basically the start of declaring a need for redevelopment of areas within the city of Canton. And you've got a resolution. The resolution starts us along the path towards declaration of an opportunity zone, which, if allowed new businesses would hire employees that could get up to a $3,500 credit. This is just step one of a multi-step process.
Okay, any questions? All right. Next item, the first reading of the alarm user ordinance.
Okay, the fire alarm user ordinance is a revision. To get my thing out, I've had so many things on this agenda. I apologize for taking a second. It's a revision to the current ordinance. It changes the fine structure and the actual year in use. The ordinance will have to be changed because we got a rolling 12-month in the fire alarm ordinance, which basically says that anybody is allowed 3 false alarms in the way it's written currently, 3 false alarms within 12 months, or a rolling 12 months before any fine is levied. In talking with the chief of police, he would like to make it the permit year. In other words, that would be a different year for every person or every business that had a fire alarm. They would be allowed to have 3 within that permit year, and at the beginning of the permit year, and that's when they file for the fire alarm system permit. They would be allowed to have 3 before the fine was assessed, and then it would clean off the slate at the end of that year and start a new year.
What is the difference between this ordinance and the ordinance that we've had?
Fine and time period primarily.
Fine and time, we
Yeah,
didn't have a fine before?
Right now, we're on a calendar year, yes, but we've increased the fines.
I had prepared something that showed what was changing. It may not have been easy to read, but the police department actually has it with a version where it's highlighted what's changed.
Yeah, I don't
If
have
you get that from the police department.
I don't have the highlighted. I do know that false alarms is a significant problem within the city. In 2013, we had 1,277 false alarms, which was up from 1,088 in 2012, and it accounts for 7.1% of reportable incidents in the police department. It's significant. Now, there are, I believe, 61 major offenders. 15 to 20% are repeat, 15 to 20% of those are repeat offenders. There are 22 flagrant violators. And we have $4,000 in outstanding collections right now that haven't been paid. We haven't issued citations on any of these that I'm aware of, but we've sent a letter of fine and $4,000 has been ignored. Some of them are chains. I won't mention any chain, but some of them are a chain where the manager of the store gets this fine and probably throws it away because he doesn't want corporate up the line to know that the fine's been assessed. So collection's been a problem, but this is just changing the ordinance versus primarily the time frame and the amount of fine.
And this is commercial and residential?
Commercial and residential. Plus, it's requiring permit. You have to get a permit. One of the suggestions that I have talked to both the chief of police, Chief Merchant, and also to our CFO, Mr. Ingram, because people might not be aware that they have to get permits and they might not always be informed. One of the things that we're talking about doing is putting at the business license desk and at the water desk, so that when a new business license is applied for, there would be an instruction sheet and if they had an alarm and the application for the alarm, and it would be just handed to the customer when they applied for a business license. Or if they came in to set up their water, they would be made aware at that time, initial of water, that they had to either transfer the permit if they were a new resident by handing them a sheet which had an instruction and the form for a permit.
Okay, so, Go
Because
ahead.
permits are currently required.
They're not required
They
now?
are currently required.
So everyone who has a security system right now should have a permit?
That is the requirement.
Is that even if it's an audible, alarm, no matter what it is?
Any,
I wonder how many actually have those that have, how many?
I know
Is there
I
an,
was-
is there an indication, Chief, of how many, residential permits there are out there?
No, but I'm sure there's quite a few out there that just don't have a monitoring service. But if we respond to that residence, we do create a permit number for that residence. They will receive a notice, and they are required to register that alarm for us to have information in the event that we have to respond in the future.
Okay, my guess is there's probably a lot more out there without permits than.
well, I know,
Yeah.
I don't think,
I know I went 2 years without one.
your question about audible, you meant alarm that does not signal to the police?
Yes.
That does not have to register. Only something that requires a response or a request a response has to register. So if you just have an internal alarm that makes noise, you don't have to register. It's only if you're linked to police.
Oh, okay,
But what
okay.
could happen, and then you would have to, Chief, correct me if I'm wrong, is if your alarm goes off and it's not monitored, and Mr. Huffman lives next door to you, and he reports it to the police, the alarm going, you will respond to that call, even though it did come through a monitored service, and I think you do leave a request to register that, do you not? So, it's not just the monitoring, it could be reported by a citizen next door that an alarm is going off at the next door house or whatever.
Then we need to change our definitions. If we intend to catch those, because the definition is, an alarm system is designed to signal the occurrence of blah, 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 requiring immediate attention and to which law enforcement is requested to respond. That definition would not catch the neighbor calling because the noise is going off.
Yeah, but aren't they,
I'm just saying, I don't think we can make somebody register unless they have a monitored system under our current definition. If we want to catch those people, we have to change the definition.
I think that we need to get with the chief, because I think the case is we're responding to false alarms, and no matter how that call comes in, I would think we'd want to be able to require some sort of future permit. We're gonna
There's
have to
all,
have it.
there's all ranges of security systems, I would think. You know,
I think
mean,
that's probably an interesting problem, Glenn, because if you have a fire alarm, I've done this in my garage, you start blowing around with one of these blowers, it'll go off. If my neighbor didn't know I was home, she might call and says there's a fire next door, you know, my neighbor's then responsible for my fine, for my permit, because that is not,
No,
your fire, well, I don't know, you're putting your future in your hands of your neighbor, being
Well,
smart enough to not, or to know what
Not
that
to
is.
register, you are putting your future, but she wouldn't be responsible.
Yeah, but I'm talking about a smoke alarm, not
Yeah, but-
alarm.
I don't see how your neighbor could be responsible because they report your alarm going off.
Well, yeah, but the police show up and say you gotta permit it, I'd say, I
Yeah,
don't.
but that's you, not the neighbor.
Wait a minute, if somebody's gonna have to permit a smoke alarm?
No,
But that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, but how do you know the difference, the sound difference to your neighbor, how do they know it's a smoke alarm versus
Well, that's the reason I said audible. I mean, audible could be smoke, or it could be a broken door.
We're talking about smoke
broken
detectors,
window.
everybody's got smoke detectors, I mean,
Yeah.
we all.
I don't know what the sound is. What's the difference in sound between a burglar alarm and a smoke alarm? You tell me. Yeah, well, you know that for a fact, okay. Mine might not do that.
Well, what if it's monitored? I mean, they monitor
If
your
you're
smoke
monitored,
too,
you
or?
can still have a false alarm, because if you're not home,
That's
you
what I'm just saying, my only point was, the definition does not include what y'all were talking about. So if we intend to register those people, we gotta change the definition.
I think the question becomes is if you've got a loud audible alarm and the business says, I know the police are gonna show up, so I won't monitor it. We've created a problem for our police department. If
It's
someone.
commercial versus residential, right now that's.
Or even residential, if mine goes off and my neighbor reports it, I've created a problem for the police department. If mine goes off and it's a false alarm. Monitored or unmonitored, if
Well, I think what Bobby is saying is right now the verbiage is if Chief Merchant shows up at my door and says, you gotta go down and get that registered, I'd say, no, I don't, I looked at the ordinance and you can't apply to me, you don't apply to me. So you either gotta change the ordinance or make it different. Right now it's wrong. It doesn't do what you want it to do.
Okay, once again, is this a fire alarm or a burglar alarm?
What I'm saying is, I say it's a burglar alarm, but I'd say, how do you know the difference between the two? So you have to be careful, because the... Okay, well, whatever.
Well, we tangle some of these up, can't we?
Well, I think it's a matter of what you want. We do it, there, you know, there are so many variables. The question is, if the police have to report to an alarm, do we want that alarm, no matter how they were requested to report, do we want that alarm to be registered for future, or do we want to require that type of alarm that's audible outside of the house to be registered? That's the basic question. I don't care one way or the other. Mine's monitored, so I don't have any problem making a permit personally, but I think that's the issue. Do we want to cut back on the number of incidences of false alarms?
Well, let me ask this question. Normally, when the alarm goes off, let's say it's an audible alarm that is monitored as well, okay? And they will, the monitoring company will pick up the phone and they will try to call you first before they send the police out, right?
If I give them my number.
Well, what if you give them the proper number and then they never call the police?
Well, what if I'm obstinate?
And yet you created a noise out there.
Like, what if I'm obstinate and say, I don't want to be awakened at 3 o'clock, just call the police direct?
They might not do it.
I don't think that,
Well, that happens.
yeah, I
But
can
I'm
imagine
just,
them to do that.
I'm just saying that happens. There are those that won't take it. And there's typically a double verify system where you don't give one number, but you give a second number, they go to the first number, the second number in that. Because the first number could typically be the home number if you have a landline, and the second number could be a cell number if you run home.
Could I make a suggestion? We don't have enough information to make a good decision. Can we push this off for a month? I mean, seriously, I think we're flying around here. We don't know what the facts are, so let's.
Put it off to the next work session.
Yes, absolutely.
Bobby, if I understand correctly, the only two changes we're changing is really the calendar, is the year in which the fines are assessed and the amounts of the fines, isn't that it? Don't we already have the ordinance?
Yes.
But it's being misapplied. Chief Merchant already told us that he is misapplying it. Unbeknownst to him, he is.
Let me send out there, the police department prepared a version that shows what's changing. It's a lot in terms of words, but that's effectively what Mr. Cummings said. And so you see what's changing. The definition of alarm system is not changing. So whatever we have now, we're gonna have afterwards. That did not change. I only spoke up because y'all were talking about something that is not covered.
Well, my point is that Chief Merchant described a situation where it shouldn't have forced somebody to go register the alarm.
Right.
Correct?
Under the definition.
Yes, so we gotta go back to the drawing board on that one, I think.
I think it's a matter of
We can do this, but we're gonna still have to change that other part of it, Bobby, do you think? That's correct?
But the responder to the alarm may not know whether it has a permit or not.
So the chief will know that they didn't have a permit, and maybe they aren't required to have one under our definition. We can pass this, but we're gonna have to go back and fix it again, so that's all I'm saying.
Yeah. Let's
move on.
Let's put this thing back on for the next work session. I think we need to do that. Okay?
You may not have a problem. Y'all may have talked yourselves into a problem. You may not even have a problem. There's probably not a significant number of people who have false alarms who aren't monitored. That may not even be a problem. You may be trying to address something that's not a problem.
Well, the bottom line is that we're only changing the fine and we're changing the time frame in which it's administered. So whether whether we hold this one month or 12 months, it doesn't affect what we're currently doing, because this ordinance doesn't change other than those two
Well, let's
things.
just leave it on the agenda for a vote,
I think
and
pause it and see if you have a
then we go
problem.
back and look at the rest of it. Okay.
Right.
Is Mr. Dyer saying that the council is overthinking?
I think he is, yes. Okay.
Pump ourselves in a circle.
Talking over.
Yeah, let's move along here. Since we solved that one, we can go solve the next one here. I know. How about the workers'
City manager,
compensation
city
agent
manager.
record, Mr. Cummings?
It's a real simple thing, it's the same insurer, all we're doing is changing the agent of record so that we get them closer, and this other agent should be more responsive than the current agent that we have.
Okay. That sounds good. Next item, review the city auction list, which is in your agenda
Once a
package.
year, we auction off all unusable equipment, which there is a list in your attachment number 9. And the list can contain everything from vehicles without transmissions and carburetors to some things that are usable, but that list, all it is it requires this council to approve the list to be
Surplus. Yeah. Okay, we already took care of the ordinance. Do you have any other reports, Mr. Cummings?
We have one letter from Propane Fire and thanking our fire department for their prompt attention. And the other thing we need to just address is that the Georgia Association of Water Professionals indicated or made or nominated and was also selected Spencer Carpenter, who is our plant manager of our wastewater treatment plant, is the top operator of the year.
Great.
That's great.
That's good to know too, you know? That is good to know.
Could I ask one
That's
question?
why we don't have EPD problems.
At the moment.
Do we have one issue with alarms in the chamber?
John, we got off the lawn. We're off the lawn.
No, this is a
did,
different
but
one.
I've been assured that it's no longer an issue.
Thank you, okay.
Okay.
Didn't want to forget it, it sounded important.
Okay, under the mayor's report, I just want to mention one thing that I will probably bring up at the next meeting is Lane Wood, who actually gave my wife a copy of the business card of the gentleman who's here about the growlers, and I actually called and spoke with him too, and I think Bill had already talked to him at that point, but Lane has been in charge of our Victory Garden East, the community garden up near the water tank on Big Oak Drive. And she had called me. They obviously back during the winter we had some pipes burst, and the water has been shut off for some time now. But the last bill was like $94 or $95. And I'm probably going to ask for your consideration to forgive that water bill for them, because they don't make any money anyway, and it's a pretty good public service to have the community garden. So anyway, that was the second one. I helped her with the first one. We took care of the first bill, which was $60-something, because normally it's been pretty much the minimum bill up until we got one for $69, and she called me and was concerned about it, and I told her that the next, we took care of that one, the next one could very likely be more to come, and it was, so I think she'd be okay now, but they will have to get in and repair those lines again, but, so, anyway, it's a good service.
We don't have to vote on that. Do we have to vote on that? No.
I don't know if we should vote on, you mean to forgive?
No, we need to,
Forgive
yeah,
or
forgive,
what?
yeah. Do we have to
Probably
do that?
should.
We have to do that. Okay.
Just to forgive. Okay, that's all that I have, so I'll entertain a motion to adjourn. Okay, I'll second that. Those in favor signify by saying aye. Discussion.
Talk about alarms. Growlers and alarms.
Everyone's watching your house.
It sounds like.